everyone. You are listening to ToRAISE Questions Doula podcast, and this is Thérèse Hakoun. I'm Executive Director of ToLabor, which is an international doula training and certification program. Hi, so I'm here in Richmond, as I always am. It is another incredibly spring-like day here in February, which is just wonderful. I walk or ride my bike most everywhere, try not to use my car. But I will tell you, riding my bike on a day that is supposed to be historically very cold since it's February and it is about 65 degrees out feels really, really wonderful. So I'm in a good mood. I want to thank everyone, as always, for supporting us and listening to this podcast. We get such wonderful feedback from people from all over the country, all over the world, actually. We have listeners in countries that I have been surprised to find out people want to hear us. So thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you to Latched Mama, as always, for continuing to sponsor and support us in the podcasting effort in editing and so forth. We really appreciate it, and we want to remind our listeners to please take a look at latchedmama.com and check out their website and their Facebook page and all of their wonderful products that they have for sale. Comfort is the main part of, I believe, their mode of operation, affordability and practicality. So and design. They're all very comfortable and attractive looking breastfeeding clothing, but you could wear them at any time, as I've talked about in the past. So please consider supporting Latched Mama as they have continued to support us. Today, we are going to have a guest, a doula, who will be talking to us about her job. She has a job that I would love to see created in many other communities around the country, but I'll let her talk about that. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back with our guest. So, hi everyone, we're back, and I'm here with Alice Wheeler, who is a birth doula and other jobs as well, like so many people, up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I'd like to welcome her. Hey, Alice, how are you?
Hi. Hello.
Well,
hi, everyone.
Thanks so much for agreeing to have this conversation with me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Great. So why don't you give us an oversight of what your job is exactly? I mean, I've introduced you as a birth doula and other. Why don't you give us an idea how that looks in your life?
Sure. So I work at a federally qualified health clinic or a community health center in Lancaster City in Pennsylvania. And we have several different locations, but I'm at the location that has the women's health department in it. So we're kind of a separate department. And I was hired initially as a part of this kind of designer grant through the Highmark Foundation. They were trying to improve birth outcomes, and part of that was providing doula services to our patients, along with accessibility to lactation support and all these different components that maybe I can get into in a few minutes.
Okay.
But my job, I've been on call for our patients here at the clinic, and they deliver at the local hospital, women and babies. And then the other half of my job is doing kind of desk work, some grants management. The biggest one is family planning funding coming through Title 10. So that's providing IUDs, Nexplanon, implant insertions, and just sort of managing money flow and making sure that all the providers are up to date on doing insertions and removing devices and appropriately educating our patients on what their options are and what's going to work best for them. So it kind of captures sort of this full spectrum of family planning. I follow people into labor and delivery, and then also am pretty involved, at least behind the scenes, in some of the options that we have here when they're thinking about how they want to continue postpartum. So those are the two things, and I was offered the desk job grants management after I had taken the doula component on, and the clinic was sort of giving me those hours so that I had an income but also more flexibility to make the doula program successful. So I was able to sort of be in and out and sort of fit together being on call and being at deliveries, and then fitting in my hours towards grant management as it worked out. So it's kind of a special spot to be in.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, to have that ability to sort of ebb and sway a little bit.
And so originally, though, you were hired to be this grant from the Highmark Foundation. Its purpose was they hired, what was the purpose for this particular program, and what were you told how you were going to be a part of that?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. I wasn't here initially when it was being sort of thought up by administration, but we applied for it. One of the things that's been really successful in our women's health department are these centering prenatals and centering parenting classes, which I think maybe some people are familiar with. It's the nationally recognized program doing these group prenatals. And so that has just been hugely successful, and we see a lot of immigrant, undocumented refugee patients, and we have providers who speak Spanish and some clinical staff that speak Nepali. So we have these prenatal groups running about in Spanish and Nepali and in English, making it accessible to all kinds of cultures and languages. And it's just been, we've seen a lot of success with breastfeeding and just community that's built between these women, and it's just been really great. Our clinical staff loves participating, and our patients really love the format.
Yeah.
So I think...
I'm sorry. I know that add in there about that, how to do those kinds of prenatals, it really, the data all shows how successful it is, and overwhelmingly. I mean, there's going to be some people who they're going to want more individualized care, and that's what, so it's not going to feel great to them. But I know that nowadays there are many doula practices that are starting to do that as well, because they know that centering has such a good reputation. Why don't we join these people together as well? So that was part of your reason that was part of the program.
So that was the sort of the beginning, was how do we expand this really successful program that's working in our facility and just make it even more so, and also maybe expand it to some of the patients who aren't involved in centering, and what are some things that we can have at this facility. So the Highmark Foundation offered, we applied for some funding from them, and their goals were to just continue teaching women to assess their own needs prenatally, and then their infants' needs, and to just sort of expand on education and added support. So they have paid for some incentives for centering. They've also, and then that was also the doula component. What are sort of bringing that on?
Yeah. So what do you mean by incentives to?
They would provide maybe like food and snacks were paid for it, or prizes,
So if you come,
brochures.
this will be we'll offer this to you.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And so then a couple other additional support measures that they were also including on top of providing some financial support to centering was, starting the doula portion of it and having doulas on hand incorporated into the facility and available to the patients. And then also lactation support. So we had somebody helping out with that. And then prenatal yoga and some childbirth education classes.
Nice.
So there are all these different sort of components of this grant that were inspired by centering.
Wow.
But I think Southeast was wanting to move beyond, maybe start with centering and then sort of be accessible to all of our patients.
Right. So Alice, you were hired to be a birth doula there.
Right. So they had the grant come in and they were looking at, okay, what do we need? And one of them was to fill this role of doulas. So that's when the midwife, who is director of women's health here, Angela Sprunger, reached out to me to see if I would be interested in moving into that position.
And so for the clientele that comes to the health services center, is there a cost to them for the doula, for the childbirth education, the so forth? Yeah.
Well, and this might be, there's a lot to talk about there, but the patients did not have to pay anything out of pocket. It was just a service provided by the clinic, and then my, salary was paid for through the grant. Right. And I was paid per doula encounter, which included being introduced to the mother and meeting with her prenatally, being on call, being there for at least a majority of her labor or for the delivery, just being there in some support role at the hospital, and then following up postpartum.
And what do you mean? How was that pay? Was it hourly or is it a fee?
It was just a lump sum.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. But that's what it included. I mean, what you were expected to do.
Whether I was there for 2 hours or 3 days, it was the same.
Right.
So.
Well, that's what doula work is, though. I mean,
right.
Yeah. But the patients did not have to pay anything.
Right.
But you would get paid. And do you mind, and you do not have to say this if you don't want, what you were being paid as a doula?
Well, it fluctuated a little bit just as we looked at different numbers. The Highmark Foundation wanted me to attend, or the doulas in general, to attend about 30 births a year. Mm-hmm. So we were just sort of adjusting depending on how many births a month or per year was happening. But it was around $500. So it's a little bit less than maybe what some doulas are used to. Yes,
and it depends on the communities, though, of course, as well.
Right.
Where, 500 is the average in some areas and way, way too low.
Less.
But,
right.
So your clientele, I'd like to know, like you said, you have classes and information presented in other languages. So you have if Nepal is one of the languages, is that because that you have many women from that area?
Yeah, our patients, it's very diverse. We see a lot of refugees and immigrants, like I said, just a lot of low income, just patients from really all over. I would say the biggest would be, Central South America, of course, and then Nepal, Burma, and then a lot of mothers from Central Africa, and more recently, Iraq, Syria, I had a Palestinian couple and a couple Egyptian families. So a little bit of everywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
And
we do have a lot of Nepali patients, though.
And
that was a big one.
Your role as a doula, so say somebody says, yes, I do want a doula. You are then introduced. Are there other doulas working with you, Alice, or are you the only one right now in the service?
It's been mostly me. I do have one backup doula, and she is actually a childbirth educator at Women and Babies. She's back and forth between the clinic and the hospital a lot, and she does some childbirth education here as well, and then follows up on some births that I haven't been able to get to. And then we're also using some of the Highmark Foundation funding to pay for one of our Spanish-speaking LPNs to go to a doula training as well.
Good.
So there's two of us and one in the works.
Right. Okay.
But for the past year or two that I've been doing this, I've done a majority for most of them.
Yeah, I know that feeling. So you're introduced to a family, and is your practice with these women like a doula would be in private practice? Like, do you do prenatal and labor, birth? Can you labor with them at home? Do you just meet them at the hospital? Do you do postpartum? I mean, is it a regular, or is there like some programs where you meet the person once they're in labor?
Once they're in labor. It's kind of varied depending on when during the pregnancy I'm introduced to them, and then of course language barriers or other considerations. But the providers were really good advocates, sort of flagging or recognizing a patient that would need doula services, a lot of single moms, or if they were nervous about the labor. And then I would also present at least once during centering pregnancy and just talk a little bit about what I do and do a little bit of education in that context in terms of labor support and what can be done, just doing some hands-on, showing them some counter pressure points and things like that. So those were sort of the two avenues where I was introduced. It was either the provider sort of pulling me into the room or sending me the patient chart, and then I would reach out to or I would meet with them in centering pregnancy circle and make connections there. And it's a little bit, it's been a big shift. I was working at a small home birth center practice in Harrisonburg, Virginia, before I was doing this. So it was a lot of water births, or if I did hospital births, it was honestly middle upper class women who had done their homework and had a lot of questions and wanted books and resources and articles and were very proactive and had seen the business of being born and were sort of tapped into that world, I guess, the natural birth world. And so the conversations I was having and the expectations were very different. Whereas here, especially with the language barrier, a lot of it was done through an interpreter. A lot of people knew that they wanted definitely an epidural, or they knew who they wanted in the room and just had some questions about specific procedures, or had questions about what their birth was going to look like in an American hospital, if they could get a tour. And a lot of our moms were high risk. We have patients who struggle with substance abuse or gestational diabetes, hypertension, for all kinds of reasons. So they didn't really have a lot of, a lot of options going into labor in terms of what they could have it look like. So I think that, sometimes it was helping educate them on a certain condition that they had, and it was less of, what do you want this to look like? Or what are some comfort measures?
I can only imagine. I mean, that you described it beautifully. I mean, see the picture of what you were doing in Harrisonburg and the conversations that you were having. And then I switched to where you are now. And yeah, it's I don't know how to compare. It's like these are more logical, daily. I like the questions. I like the one that's, how will my birth look in an American hospital? I mean, that's such a great question. Everyone should ask that question, whether they from the States or not.
Right.
But I mean, and helping negotiate that pathway for people who aren't a part of the culture at all is, I can imagine that's where you're spending more time than talking about comfort measures.
Right.
Which you,
right.
And I'm sure you are.
Because there were some, right, because there are some moms who were from maybe Central Africa who were having their 5th or 6th child, and all of their previous births had been natural, whether they wanted them to be or not, just
right.
In terms of context where they were. So they had a pretty good setup to use the birth ball and the jacuzzi and be a little bit less monitored during labor. But it is that, well, what does it look like, and what do you mean I can't leave the hallway, or can I wear my own clothes? So sometimes a lot of the conversations felt very basic to me, but that's sort of where the patients were coming from, and that's where their questions were. So
yeah, and what do you do? Well, it is very interesting and really important to understand that different, taking yourself, as the new word is, bubble, out of the bubble. But yeah, shifting to, there are different priorities at times, and it doesn't mean that they also don't need to know about comfort measures and positions and their options and choices, but that's all a part of that, except for here are the, how will I get there? Might be one of them. And yeah. And
oh yeah, when do taxis run?
Yeah.
All these little details that sometimes you don't really even think about.
Right.
You have to sort of pull back and just figure out what exactly their needs are.
Right.
And some of our patients, that was a big question, is how am I even going to get to the hospital? And they might not have money to even afford a taxi. And
right.
so it's just a lot of coordinating them with some of our social workers who work here, providers, nurses, and just sort of tapping in and sort of being a part of connecting them to those resources as well. You have to get a little creative sometimes.
So what would you say, I mean, do you know, you have other women coming to the center who are not refugees or immigrants. What would you say the percentage is? Is it like a 50-50 split of that, or is it, and I'm just curious for my own thinking.
Yeah. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I feel like it's a little bit skewed.
Yeah.
Just because I was a missionary kid. I grew up in Egypt and Palestine, Israel, actually. So I was paired a lot with moms who spoke Arabic so that I could provide some informal translating at the hospital.
That's great.
So at least for me, it was a lot of connecting with people who are outside of the Lancaster community, but about 50-50, I would say. Yeah. I'm not exactly sure of the exact numbers, but...
And I mean, I know the clinic does other things besides birth, obviously. But how many women a year would you say are coming through, do you know that, are coming through the center and are, that is their prenatal care?
Is their prenatal care? I think it's somewhere between 500 average.
Okay.
We usually have between 20 and 40 births a month, I would say. And our providers have privileges at the hospital. So that also actually was helpful to me if a patient forgot to call me or didn't know when to call me,
right.
then sometimes our own providers, or it's a learning hospital, so there are a lot of residents. The residents would see in the patient's chart that they were interested in doula services, and they have my number and can call me as well. So a lot of the births I went to, the mom wanted me there, but sometimes it took relying a little bit on our providers or the residents as well to actually alert me
I see.
when to come.
Yeah, well.
And a couple times I went and met people in their home, but not a lot of our patients were extremely comfortable with that.
Right. So it would be more of the hospital. What do you do about the language barrier, Alice? I mean, this is something not everyone is going to. Yeah. So what do you do when you can't speak their language and there isn't, it's a different language than you have an interpreter for?
Yeah. That has taken a little bit of figuring out. Sometimes the patients will have somebody in the room that can translate for them just because once they're actually at the hospital, maybe a husband or boyfriend or someone who can do a little bit of translating, and that's always helpful. But if there is nobody that can translate, say with some of our Nepali patients, or I don't speak Spanish, and I had a mom one time that couldn't speak any English. She just knew Spanish, so we couldn't communicate.
So what did you do?
I was with her for 12 hours. I kind of just go on in and start. I use a lot of tapping, so maybe I'll tap on her body, like her arm first, and just sort of motion that I want to rub somewhere or press somewhere, and communicate like that. Or if I want them to focus on their breathing, it's a lot of demonstrating for them first. So
That's
maybe
great.
Pointing at my nose and taking a deep breath and sort of motioning that I want them to do what I'm doing.
And you were with her for 12 hours doing, being very present in the truest sense of the way, and doing body language the whole time. That was your communication.
A lot of body language and
both
eye
of you.
contact.
Yeah, which actually, I mean, that's wonderful. And it's such a challenge, not to be able to communicate verbally with someone and try and figure out. But here you did it. And it's a good reminder to all of us that it isn't often the words that we need. It's more about being there and, reading the person.
And once I sort of found something, so maybe rubbing her back, I would maybe show her the oil that I was going to use. And then once I started rubbing her back, I could do that for 3 hours and she could sort of fall asleep. So it wasn't, once we sort of found a rhythm and she understood what I was doing there, it wasn't a huge problem.
That's
and
good.
I would always joke with the ladies, especially at the Nepali or Spanish centering group, they would ask, do you know any Nepali? Do you know any Spanish? And I would say, no, I don't. But once you're in labor, we're not going to be chit-chatting anyway. And they would all kind of laugh.
Yeah. You say, I know how to speak the language of labor. It doesn't.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. That
we'll find each other in between.
That's it. That's what I'm good at. So I guess then you've seen all different kinds of experiences with the different population of women that you work with. And I say that not that every woman is an experience that you have, but learning to be respectful of the different cultural practices, has that been an issue, or how did you feel comfortable in that role?
I think with the Middle Eastern woman, it was pretty straightforward.
Is that because of your background?
Right. Just having that experience, I think just we were able to communicate, and I could understand if they couldn't eat one thing or if they weren't comfortable doing this and that. Those were a little bit easier to navigate. With some of the other cultures, I relied a lot on our providers. A lot of the providers here speak multiple languages and have experience living overseas, maybe in Central America or throughout Africa and different regions, and speak French and Spanish and all these things. And so sometimes I would check in with them and just do a little bit of research before going into labor with someone. And some cultures, like some of our Ethiopian women or Somali, it's sort of we're all learning together and relying, at least when we have the interpreter on the phone, to cover some of that ground with not a lot of previous knowledge or experience with it. So it's just, and it's interesting because it's not working with just one culture, it's working with
so many,
a lot. And so it's hard to keep up exactly, and sometimes you have to separate it out maybe by region. So knowing that, okay, people in East Africa, this is how they would perceive labor and birth, and this is what's important to them.
And how do you know that, though?
I think it's just a lot of online, a lot of talking to providers, and then talking to the patient, and eventually you're able to make some guesses, but can't always assume or generalize. But
you got that background.
I can maybe use a starting point.
Right. Yeah, you got the background, and then meet the person where they are, though, then, and learn from them. Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm asking you those questions, Alice, because I think we think, I wouldn't know what to do with somebody, from another culture. And I think the bottom line always comes down to we're compassionate, we're caring, we're respectful. We ask questions as we can or as appropriate, if it's feasible, to be clearer. But then if we come from the place of really caring, that's going to be the most outstanding part of the care. And then I think it is educating yourself, like you said, with research and talking to providers and to the people themselves, but then remembering that's a stereotype to a certain degree. So we have to be careful with meeting the person where they are. But you just are so exposed to so many different cultures, including American cultures.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say that's one of the biggest ones that throws me through a loop sometimes is, being able to just be silent and open to everyone, even if they do speak English and are from Lancaster or, somewhere in America, and just sort of applying those same principles that I would use with somebody who is from Burma, just still being able to be quiet and listen and open-minded and ask similar questions, because I think that's something that I've just been really, had a heightened awareness to, is just how diverse everybody is just within America. You can't make assumptions about anybody.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. And
I mean, I guess I've known that for a while, but it is interesting in the context of this clinic and labor and how that plays out. For somebody who's coming from somewhere overseas to someone who has lived in this county their whole life, it's pretty fascinating to see personality and culture play out in the birth room.
Yeah, I imagine so. Well, yeah, you've got a microcosm of the world going on a regular basis in your life. I mean, you are immersed in it. What is your biggest frustration, or has been your biggest frustration or challenge with doing this work as a birth doula?
I think it's probably the two biggest things is that it is hard to do this just by myself. I do have Amy, my backup doula, but she's not always available, and I don't think I quite realized going into it that I would be sort of heading it up on my own, and But once it kind of got started, there hasn't been a lot of space to really look for anyone else and catch our breath. So I think that has been an interesting, that has been a huge challenge. It's a lot. There's so much need, and you never feel like you're even putting a dent in it sometimes. I mean, it's hard to sort of track and look at what you do as a doula in a tangible way sometimes. It's very, individualized, and a lot of it is just very emotional work, which you can't always point to.
Right.
So I think managing that just on my own and being on call for as long as I have has been exhausting and has been a little bit of a cycle of burnout, going to maybe 6 births 1 month and then just 1 the next month because I'm still recovering from the last month. It's sort of been the pattern, at least in the past year or so, is sometimes the doula rates are very dependent on where I'm at emotionally and physically. And I think,
You think what?
Well, I think that it's been a lot of doing and being involved and seeing all these women who have such high needs physically and emotionally, and inserting myself into their lives just briefly. I mean, I think all doulas experience this, but just finding that balance of separating myself from their story and from their experience, and yet still showing up and being present and being with them through such a vulnerable time. Just that balance is constantly a push and pull, and finding where those lines are. That's definitely been a learning process and probably will be forever.
Well, I think
there's always...
Yeah, I think it's always the challenge, and I think you're right. I think doulas do experience this of you get a glimpse into somebody's life at a very powerful but vulnerable time, like you said, and you get intimately involved, in essence, with these people. And it is hard to be detached yet loving at the same time, loving and yet be detached. So it is that line. But I think that when you are in this field, for the majority of us, come into it because you're a caring, compassionate person who wants to provide comfort and services to people at this period of life. I think that when you are, because of that's who you are, I think when you're working with a population of people who may be marginalized by all different factors or in really tough situations in so many different ways, I think it must be so much harder to separate yourself because you have to, but you care and you did get to know them or you saw the needs in them that they may not have even known what the needs were and wanting to fix. So I can imagine that is a really hard balance in a job like this in particular, because you want to provide that need to people.
And it's hard to know, right? And it's hard to know. It's those balances and lines and creating that, giving enough of yourself that you're providing this compassionate and intimate care, but also able to do a lot of self-care.
Right.
A lot of that has been, it's just been a lot to figure out in this context. Because right when I felt like I had figured it out in this out-of-hospital birth world in rural Virginia, I mean, this is a whole different animal.
Yes.
And I can't just be... some of the things that worked for me in at the birth center, I just can't quite apply them here just because of the volume,
right,
or because of the high risk on so many different levels. It's just it's so hard to figure out. And as a doula, you're feeling that, I guess you could say, maybe emotional deficit that the providers and clinical staff want to give. Maybe they do, but they're trained to really pull back and set those lines. And even here, where I would say a lot of our providers, they want to be at these births and they have that connection with the patient, but they just can't. They're not going to get paid necessarily to go in or to follow this patient as closely as they might want to. And so sometimes the providers will call on me to follow their patients because they just want to extend that part of themselves by offering me as a service,
which is lovely,
to continue that care, which is lovely. But then I need to go home too and make sure that I'm eating and sleeping and able to go back in for the next one. And some of these births have just been wild. I mean, 3. I think the longest stretch I was in the hospital was with a single mother. She's a little bit older, from here visiting from Central Africa, and she didn't have anyone with her, so I went in for the whole induction from Friday night till Sunday night, and I barely slept, and it just is overwhelming. Even when the birth goes somewhat straightforward, it's just the time and energy.
So have you learned how, or I guess my first question would be, are you the reason, sorry, I'm mumbling here. Are you able to say no to births by your job? And then the next question, which was going to be my first one, are you able to say no?
Right. I can, how do I answer that? I can. And I think people check in and say, I've heard that recently too from some of the nurses and providers, you can say no if you want to, but my instinct is always to say yes. And so that's something that is really hard for me.
So that answers my second question. Can you say no?
Do this.
Right.
And I think I've had to learn to say no a lot more. I think the first year and a half that I was doing this program, I was excited about all the different experiences I was having and really threw myself into it. And I think over the past year or so, I've had to learn to say, well, I guess, nope.
Well, and that's, you know what, Alice, that's so important, and it is so, I think, difficult again, given who so many of the people are like yourselves who choose to do this work. I mean, you are a giver, you are a yes person, and to say no was why it was my first but second question. Can you say no? And you it's really hard, but like you expressed right at the very beginning of this conversation that you've had some burnout, and that's what happens. And when doulas do this work for X amount of time, and for some it's shorter and for some it's longer, most everyone will go through the period of, oh God, this is just too much. I can't. And that's normal after, being at a long labor. But if it's a continuum, we really need to pay attention to it. And that's where I see doulas get, and I use this word in quotation marks, smarter about how they're going to practice, because they realize, and it goes to the thing that I've always said. I say it at workshops, I say it here, I say it anywhere. It's, if you're not showing up in your own life, but you're showing up in everybody else's, you just can't keep doing that. You can't show up in everybody else's life if you're not showing up in your own. It doesn't serve us well, and that doesn't mean we are always perfect at it. I mean, we are going to overextend ourselves sometimes, and we're going to then realize, okay, but the message that I had to teach myself was that does not mean I have to overextend myself all the time. It's learning my big lesson is learning just because I can doesn't mean I should. And, but it's hard to play triage with people's lives.
Oh, Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And I think that, it's just so hard by the nature of people who are drawn into doula work and who are just, so successful and so involved in their doula work. I mean, when you hear that a mom is incarcerated and she's going to be alone and she has no one and she's just had such a difficult life, especially recently, and or maybe she doesn't speak the language and she's only been here for a couple months.
Yes.
I mean, it's hard not to say, gosh. I mean, even if I'm not doing like the whole shebang with the massage and even if I can't be there, I still want to just. She needs someone. I mean, someone has to be there.
Oh, I can imagine.
So I get sucked into everything, and I want to, but it is. Yeah, when is it just too much? And when do you hear those stories and say, she's gonna be okay. I know the nurses are kind. I know she's gotten good prenatal care, and I don't have to be there in order for her to have a good experience, or I can't even really think about what her experience is going to look like because I'll just be in a state of constant just worry and guilt. But it was kind of a wake-up call recently talking to someone I know. I was just telling them all these different stories of birth experiences, some really funny, some really hard, and they were like, well, you're talking about these women's birth experiences or lives like they're your own, but none of these things happen to you. I mean, what have you done in the past year that was just a little bit selfish and just for you? Like, where are your stories? And I realized I didn't have that many at all. And all of my experiences on all the everything that I had was illustrating and filling the last year of my life has been sort of outside of myself, and just so that was just interesting to think about.
I think, and I want to say, though, two things. One is you guys need more help at your clinic, obviously.
Yeah.
So I hope,
always.
Yes, I'm hoping that they are seeing that this is Is there a timeline on this as far as grant money goes or anything? Is there?
It's a 2-year grant, but it's been extended a little bit just as we considered ramp-up time and just integrating it. So it's going technically through this summer or through the end of this year. And
do they see it as successful?
The dual aspect of it has been successful. The hospital have just been so wonderful in receiving me there. I have felt always very included in the birth team and welcomed.
And so you should.
It's so great. I mean, it's been a really wonderful, eye-opening experience, and I've just been genuinely inspired by the nurses and staff there. And there were a couple of moments this year where maybe a nurse didn't understand what I was doing, or there was question about my role in conjunction coming from the clinic and what badge do I wear and who do I belong to and what am I doing, and people from all over the hospital, educators and on all different levels, have just been huge advocates and have been extending my role to residents and nurses and lead nurses and front desk, making sure they understand that I am necessary.
That's great, Alice.
I think
you're doing a great job.
So that's been a huge thing in all of this and has given me a lot of energy. And last May, I was invited by one of the staff, the nurse educators, to come and actually talk on the hospital campus about what I do.
That's
I talked about labor. I showed them everything that we have to sign and that we have to be recertified, and just sort of walked them through what it means to actually be certified and what questions to ask doulas coming in. And I started each one because I did 5 different sessions so that we could hit, day, evening, night shift.
Right.
And I'd always ask, what is your experience? And some had good experiences, some had no opinion, and some had really horrible experiences. And I was like, well, doulas are about as different as, it's so individualized.
True.
We're all different
That's
people.
True.
We're here with different people. I can't speak to all of us, but here's my experience, and just, talking about what it's looked like for me and what it has meant to be certified, and just how I continue to keep learning from them, and also from everyone I work with, and different readings.
That's
and things
great.
that
What a great opportunity.
Yeah, and I think it came out really positive. No matter what stories or experiences that they wanted to share at the beginning, by the end of it, after I talked about my experience, talked about our patient demographic, and how that all works and how I fit into it, everyone was really positive, and we were just talking and joking, and it felt really good to connect with them in that way. Especially, it helped that I had been going to a lot of births and had been in some really difficult birth experiences, either with our incarcerated mothers or fetal demise, or just really long inductions. And so a lot of the nurses had seen me in action and understood where I was coming from, and so they were able to listen and take it in. And
That's great.
It was nice to have a little bit of a platform outside of a birth, and talking over a patient, and being able to actually look at each other and talk about it a little bit more.
Right, exactly.
Was good.
Yeah, I think that is an opportunity that I would like to say to any of our listeners, that if you have the opportunity to spend time with labor and delivery nurses in some capacity where you can really discuss things, talk, it's you realize everybody has a side and everybody has an intention, and we all really just want to work together, and that's how it all manifests. You were fortunate you had a big group to be able to address in one fell swoops.
And sometimes it's hard to navigate that in the moment.
Yes,
I'm always respectful and always let them have their space, and just have learned a lot of how to where to sort of push and pull back. But I think also a big question at the end of those presentations was, well, how can we help you?
That's great.
How can we work together? All of them, really, that was one of the bigger questions, giving you a pass to the room that has the birth balls in it so that we don't have to get them for you. Is that helpful? And we were able to talk about some of those details that in the moment, it's like, oh, can I go do this? And can I go into that room? And am I allowed to do this? And they're not really sure. And
so it sounds like in many ways, Alice, you're in a situation that really I wish we could recreate. And I know that they exist in other communities, but I wish it were the norm everywhere that these kinds of healthcare systems were set up where it's such collaborative care, and the best interest of those who are coming in is being looked at and trying to serve the best way that it can. What a difference, and what a wonderful message to people who are having a tough time in their life, or are just new here and they're struggling or adjusting to life new. And imagine being incarcerated and having to experience birth in that way. I wish it were everywhere, and what you are offering out there is some information about how it does exist, and how it does work, and how it can work, and how doulas can play an integral part with that. But the other thing you're also bringing up in this conversation, which we're going to have to kind of wrap up, is that how important it is to find that balance. And I think your friend, or the person that was talking to you, gave you one of the best questions, which I think is a question, it stopped me for a moment to think, and I hope it will stop the listeners to think as well, as, well, that's all about other people's lives. What about your life? And I think that's an awesome question that you, me, everyone needs to ask in our lives. Is it about everyone else? And that's good. We like to help other people, but is that it? Are we telling other people's stories, not our own stories? Though you are part of that their story, but it's where are the other things? And that's where we can mislead ourselves and like, well, I am talking, this is my life. And yes, it is your life, but is that good enough? And I would love to give people the opportunity, if you're okay, Alice, that if they have any questions, that they maybe could reach out to you.
Yeah, no, I would welcome that, because I feel like I could talk about this for so long. There's so many other things I could have brought up, but there's only so much in this amount of time that you can cover. So I hope this was a good glimpse into what I do, and it has been successful in so many ways, and well received by the hospital, and they're talking about what it would look like to have hospital-based doulas, which is always exciting, and to see like what it looks like to support women, whether they're low risk or high risk. And there's just so much playing into this in terms of context and culture and language and support and self-care, and there's a lot of ground to cover. And so I welcome anybody that wants to email or call me. It's also good just for me. This has just been really helpful to reflect a little bit on what the last year has looked like, because so much of it has just been doing and going and being sort of disappearing into people's lives and stories. And it's only been recently that I've really had to stand back and try to get some perspective on that and make sure that I've processed a birth case that happened a year ago, so that it's not affecting births or even just relationships that I'm in now. Because that doesn't just go away, even though there has been 30 births between that one and this one. You know, they all play together, and I just want to make sure that I always have, like I said, just that reverence and appreciation for birth, and that I don't lose that, and that I'm not going to a birth and feeling tired or uninterested or wishing you blank.
Well, I will. What we will do is we will post Alice's email address on our website podcast section in the resource section, so that if you do want to contact her, you are welcome to do that. Maybe Alice will have another conversation again about the things that you weren't able to cover this time, because I do think working with, we know that this work so often is Caucasian, often middle class women and upper middle class women. And as you know, as we all know, I hope, everybody deserves this kind of compassionate care. And so to hear you with your experiences with such a diverse clientele is really unique in many ways. So yeah, let's consider doing this again. And I just want to thank you, though, for today, for taking the time to talk with me and help everybody by telling your stories. So
thanks for having me.
Yeah, and thanks everyone for listening, and we'll be back again with another episode.